वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचानूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुं श्रीकृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु. Pranams from Dr. R.J. Kalpana. Welcome to the study of the Bhagavad Gita. In this session, we will study Chapter 6, AtmaSamyamaYoga, from Shloka 19 onwards. Let us understand what Krishna means by a disciplined mind. In Shloka 19, Krishna says, "As a light does not flicker in a windless place, such is stated to be the picture of the disciplined mind of the yogi practicing meditation on God." A beautiful simile where a steady light is a perfect illustration of a steady mind. So that mind which is protected from all sides during meditation is not subject to restless moments, to unruly thoughts, and remains uniformly luminous like the steady flame of a burning lamp. That mind is defined as a disciplined mind. And what is more important here is the fact that the yogi practicing meditation on God has a disciplined mind, harnessing his senses, harnessing his limbs, remaining in a posture of immovability. The yogi brings his mind under control and fixes his attention on the divine light in the heart, which is the first step in the practice of meditation. Shloka 20. The state in which, curbed through the practice of yoga, the mind becomes still, and in which, realizing God through subtle reason, purified by meditation on God, the soul rejoices only in God. So once the mind has withdrawn from the world of the senses, once the mind has fixed its attention on the divine, that mind which is purified by meditation, constant meditation, realizes the divine and rejoices the divine. So please note, there are two different conditions that is mentioned in this shloka: realizing God, rejoicing God. So realizing God in common parlance is what we would define as liberation. God realization, self realization are terms that we are very familiar with. But what does it mean to realize the divine? It means to realize, to perceive the divine within one's own self, to realize that the divine is not outside in a place where we have to make a trek, a Himalayan trek. On the contrary, the trek and the mountains must be vanquished within our own self, the Himalayas of our ego. So we realize God and then we rejoice in God. The state of merger with the divine, where there is celebration, there is joy, there is endless grace of a soul that's come back home. Shloka 21. Nay, in which the soul experienced the eternal and supersensuous joy which can be apprehended only through the subtle and purified intellect, and wherein established the said yogi moves not from truth on any account. So in continuation with the rejoicing of the divine, rejoicing of the soul in the merger of the divine, Krishna here explains the eternal and supersensuous joy the soul experiences, and that which can be apprehended only through the subtle and purified intellect. The Vijnanamaya kosha of ours must be purified to such an extent that we can only apprehend this joy. We can only experience this joy. It's experiential. The divine is experiential. It is not something. It's not an object that we can attain, but it is something that we can experience, we can perceive. And having established oneself within the divine, having established oneself firmly by merger with the divine, that yogi does not step away from the truth on any account. The truth here is the reality, the unmanifested reality, the nirguna Brahma. So that yogi, ever established in the divine, will never return back to a human form on any account. Shloka 22. And having obtained which he does not reckon any other gain as greater than that, and established in which he is not shaken even by the heaviest of sorrows. So once he has attained the state of merger, there is no reward higher than that, and there is no sorrow or tragedy which can shake him, shake the calmness and the steadiness of his mind, because he has maintained himself irrevocably established in that divine. Whatever temptations the world might offer remains insignificant in the presence of that divine. And our history is replete with sages, with rishis, with saints, with kings who have given up their worldly life, their worldly possessions, their royal, opulent, and decadent lifestyles to live in quiet hermitages far away from the city, with not even a piece of cloth to their name, and accepting whatever nature provides depending on her seasons. Shloka 23. That state called yoga, which is free from the contact of sorrow in the form of transmigration, should be known. Nay, this yoga should be resolutely practiced with an unwearied mind. And here Krishna categorically states that yoga which helps the human attain freedom from the cycle of birth and death, that yoga should be determinedly practiced with a mind which is unwearied, which isn't burdened by boredom, by guilt, but with a joy, but with an intense pleasure, the thought of homecoming. And so that state called yoga must be practiced, says Krishna. Shloka 24. Completely renouncing all desires arising from thoughts of the world and fully restraining the whole pack of the senses from all sides by the mind. And here Krishna begins to explain the methodology that is required to attain that state of yoga. First, renounce all desires. Renounce the thoughts of the world which only lead to more desires, and restrain the senses by the mind. And that is why we sit in meditation with our eyes closed. As long as the eyes are open, there is constant feedback of information to the mind. There are objects to see, to perceive, to understand. So we shut down our senses, beginning with our eyes, which is a very powerful sense organ, and thereby restraining the thoughts that consequently arise from the mind, and consequently then renounce the desires that drive us hither and thither, the temptations that we seek to fulfill, whose pleasures are transitory. To give you an example, take a glass jar and add multicolored paper to the glass jar. Shake the glass jar vigorously. What happens? All the multicolored paper in the glass jar is mixed and is in a state of turbulence. And in that situation, I ask you to pick up only 10 red colored paper. Will you be able to do it? It's difficult because the multicolored paper is in constant motion. You go to pick the red, the blue comes to your hand. You go to pick the red, a green comes to your hand. To isolate only the red amongst the multicolors might be a tough job. Now set the glass jar aside on a table and leave it undisturbed for 30 minutes. What happens? All the multicolored paper that is flying within the glass jar settles down at the bottom of the glass jar. And in that state, I ask you once again to pick up 10 red colored paper only. Now, will you be able to do it? Easily. Because the multicolored paper have all settled down. They are no longer in motion. Our mind is like the glass jar, and the multicolored paper are all the thoughts that we have. Red for anger, blue for communication, yellow for fear. I'm randomly assigning emotions to colors. But in a single minute, the number of thoughts that our mind is subject to is mind-boggling. And that is why often we go towards the refrigerator, we open it and then stand staring, wondering what it was that we wanted to pick from the fridge. We go to the supermarket with a list of 10 items to buy. We come home with 7. And that is why there is constant drainage of energy that we have. There is constant rush. There is constant fatigue of the mind. Because we are slaves to our thoughts. Our thoughts are not focused. The mind is not focused. Then the mind is a slave to the thoughts. We are walking towards the fridge with an intent, with a particular purpose. The mind gets distracted. We see the phone, we see something on the dining table, and there is another action, a to-do list, an item that we need to do. The mind gets distracted. And so we go to open that fridge. And now we have lost our thought. Because that red colored paper that we want to pick has been shot out of the ballpark by the blue. And that is why we are constantly in a hurry. We are constantly rushed to fulfill things to do. Because the first time we do it, we are not working at our optimal best. Skill in action, Arjuna, said Krishna in chapter 2. This is what that means, skill in action. To be our best, to be at our optimal best, to work with our full potential at every moment in time. To put our best foot forward, irrespective of who the audience may or may not be. That is the hallmark of a yogi. Because in the yogi's mind, there is only one thought. There is only one action, the divine. Every act takes him that much closer to that divine. Shloka 25. He should through gradual practice attain tranquillity, and fixing the mind on God through reason, controlled by steadfastness, he should not think of anything else. Rather self-explanatory shloka. Through gradual practice, it takes a certain degree of training that we must undergo. We train the mind to behave in a certain manner. So gradual practice is required, fixing the mind on one thought of the divine and maintaining that thought at all costs, irrespective of how many thoughts we might have, irrespective of how many multicolored paper that's flying around in the glass jar. Our focus, our attention must be only on that red colored paper only. And so Krishna says he should not think of anything else other than God. Shloka 26. Drawing back the restless, fidgety mind from all those objects after which it runs, he should repeatedly fix it on God. Ignore the restlessness of the mind. Ignore the thoughts that arise. Treat them as uninvited guests. They will go away. The more we engage in a dialogue with our thoughts, the more power we are giving to them. It could be positive thoughts, it could be negative thoughts. Unfortunately, the negative thoughts have far greater consequences for our peace of mind, for our health. So draw away from those thoughts, ignore them, and repeatedly, again and again and again, repeated practice, bring that mind back to the divine. Fix it on that divine. Shloka 27. For to the yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, who is sinless, whose passion is subdued, and who is identified with Brahma, the embodiment of truth, knowledge and bliss, supreme happiness comes as a matter of course. And so here Krishna gives us the reward of our practice. And what is that reward? Sat Chit Ananda. So for that yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, Sthita Prajna, balanced equanimity, the same in the face of immense joy, the same in the face of an immense tragedy, who is beyond samskaras, who has undergone the bhog of his samskaras, who has purified himself to such an extent, whose passions are subdued, and was finally identified with Brahma, was finally identified with the reality. And that bliss, that supreme happiness, Ananda, will come to experience as a matter of course. It is but a natural progression of the activity that the yogi has engaged himself in. Shloka 28. The sinless yogi, thus uniting his self constantly with God, easily enjoys the eternal bliss of oneness with Brahma. Once again, Krishna speaks about the sinless yogi. This is very important for us to understand, because in order to achieve merger with the divine, our heavy load of samskaras must be emptied. We must have undergone the bhog of those samskaras, or we must have purified ourselves of all those samskaras that is preventing us from merging with the divine. Oil and water cannot mix, can they? So what is it that is preventing our merger with the divine? One is a human dimension with a subtle body of samskaras, a little suitcase of memories, of impressions, of likes, of dislikes. And another, a celestial, the divine from which creation itself came forth. That state of perfect purity. And in order to achieve merger, we too have to undergo and achieve a fine degree of purity. And so Krishna says, having achieved that, unite yourself constantly with the divine and enjoy the eternal bliss of oneness with Brahma. Be there with the divine in the unmanifested reality. Experience Sat Chit Ananda. Having once experienced that, there is no more return to this mortal world. Shloka 29. The yogi who is united in identity with the all-pervading infinite consciousness and sees unity everywhere, beholds the self present in all beings and all beings as assumed in the self. So here Krishna is explaining the condition that one can experience with merger with the divine, because our consciousness has expanded to such an extent, no longer are we at a subconscious state of being, that our consciousness has expanded to match with the universal consciousness, that we are united with the identity of that divine consciousness, that we too begin to perceive the divine in everything and everyone around us. What a beautiful condition to have. I pray we all get to experience this. Shloka 30. He who sees me, the universal self present in all beings, and all beings existing within me, never loses sight of me, and I never lose sight of him. And so here Krishna says that he who doesn't lose sight of the divine, irrespective of whichever form the divine chooses to take in this material world. He never loses sight of me, and I too do not lose sight of him. Just as the ether permeates every particle of water in the cloud, even so the divine permeates every particle of matter in the universe. The universe is sustained on that divine principle. योगेशो सच्चिदानन्दो वासुदेवो रजप्रियं धर्मसंस्थापको वीरं कृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुं श्रीकृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।